let's get started. Many of you are familiar with the Sudo Talks webinar series, but just to reiterate, this is for you all, the Mac admins, by us, the Apple experts. We tend to work with Apple quite extensively and eat, breathe, and sleep it, right? So this is a monthly webinar series we do, and we did this one. We were going to take January off, to be frank. Travis wanted some time off. I did too. But this was a pretty important topic, and we're going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of it, but we wanted to make sure everybody was aware of what's going to happen in the next couple of days here in terms of macOS Ventura, the system update process, and what's changed, and kind of how you're going to have to think about it differently, and what you will need to action on, if anything. So that's the webinar we're covering today. You can refer to me as Ponce. I lead the operations and security teams here at Addigy. I am also in Mac admin Slack under Ponce and the Addigy integrations channel. So check me out there if you want to ask questions or whatnot. Travis, take it away.
Yep, I'm part of the solutions architect team. So I do a lot of the customer onboarding, a lot of kind of pre-sales engagement. So if you've come on board with us in the last year or so, there's a good chance we've talked a time or two. We kind of like Ponce, you wear a couple of different hats. I've done some help on the ACE training, ACE certification, things like that. And yeah, that's where you can kind of find me in odd places here and there.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. All right. So here is the first request we have of you all. I know we're supposed to be teaching you all stuff, but we're going to put in the chat here a Google form link. I'm going to actually copy this link and send it in the chat. We want your all feedback. We started these webinars mainly from feedback from you all, and we want to continue making these webinars, just as good as they are today, if not better, with the feedback you have. That's how we do it. I will say this is feedback on the entire webinar series. I'm going to send the link. So anything you want to add, I will say we are working on switching off GoToWebinar to another platform. So if that's some of your feedback, don't worry. We're already tackling that, and we have plans to change that in 2023 to get us some better virtual backgrounds here, more exciting ones at least. All right. With that, there is a section in that feedback form where you will have the chance to win one of these shirts that we're wearing here. It says Addigy on the side. It has little
we'll
cool
give you
stuff on the back.
Don't worry, thanks to this shirt, I don't have a bad side, so I can give everybody a little, get you a little 360 view how it looks, little detailing on the sleeve, little branding doesn't hurt. So
I think your modeling skills might be a little too fast because it got blurry.
Fair enough. Here, we'll just we'll throw that up there, just kind of leave it for a minute. But yeah, so fill out that Google form with ideas of things you'd want to see, and you might find yourself hugged in one of these very nice Sudo Talk shirts. So
yeah, actually, there's a little bit more to that. To win the shirt, you actually have to post on our Reddit. We're gonna send it here after the webinar of what you thought of this webinar. You can be as brutally honest as you want. We take no offense to whatever is said, especially about Travis's modeling skills. So just if you're interested in a shirt, at this point, just when you're ready, leave a comment on how we did on the webinar. We really looking for feedback, and send it in the Google form link. I see some cybersecurity awareness, concerned about obfuscated links. It's just a Google form link. It's anonymous. You don't have to put any personal information unless you want the t-shirt, because we do need to contact you somehow to send it to you. So the requirement is post on the Reddit link. I just put it in the chat after the webinar. Submit it with your feedback, and we'll be sending you out one. So we're really excited about it. We're going to do more things like this regularly. So just keep an eye out. Join the Sudo Talks. We'll be doing more things like this. And with that said, we'll just go on to our regularly scheduled program here, if you will, and talk about the main agenda of this webinar. Navigating uncertainty and system updates post macOS Ventura. I think this was definitely one of our longer titles, and as you can see, we were definitely uncertain about the title. So let's talk about the agenda. We're going to talk about some of the new features and disruptive changes in macOS Ventura. We already did a session on macOS Ventura earlier. If you missed it, check out addigy.com/events. It's there. It talks more in depth about the actual macOS Ventura upgrade process, and during, I think it was October when we did that one. But this one specifically is going to talk about the changes that have relevance today with system updates/upgrades, and we're going to talk about what the upgrade versus update process is in macOS Ventura and kind of how it worked historically and what we're used to expecting. Then obviously January 22nd, 2023 is what we're calling, I don't know. Yes, this is being recorded, so no worries if you can't watch. So January 22nd, 2023, which coincidentally falls on a Sunday, is macOS Ventura Day, as we're going to call it. What that means is it's the end of the 90-day deferral window process for macOS. And if you're not familiar with that, we're going to talk at length in this webinar about it, so no worries. We're going to talk about how to handle upgrades going forward. And then last but not least, what to action on, if anything. So that's the main agenda. And we're going to get right into the meat and bones here. So the new features and changes in Ventura that are the most impactful, and it's always interesting to discuss or listen to kind of some of the impactful changes that these new operating systems have on different users or you know, IT admins, because I think I can hear 12 different reasons why people won't upgrade to Ventura and 12 different reasons why they should upgrade to Ventura. So it's definitely something that is a unique situation for everybody, and it really depends. So I think the biggest changes from our perspective are the system preference changes. So if you're unfamiliar with macOS Ventura, it actually changed system preferences to a new mechanism called system settings. System settings actually look more like an iOS device. So if you're familiar with iOS devices, it looks a lot like the iOS settings and a lot unlike how system preferences used to be. They also did a bunch of virtualization framework changes. So if you use like tools like Parallels or VirtualBox or VMware, those may be problematic depending on what operating system you're using and what hardware. But by and large, there were some virtualization framework changes. And the biggest one that we're going to be talking about today is has the changes to system updates that allows full OS upgrades as minor system updates. So these are the major changes that we're going to be kind of focusing on in Ventura. But I'm going to take a second here and ask if anybody wants to say in the chat reasons why they do or do not want to upgrade their fleet to Ventura. Like any showstoppers for you, any big problems, any tools not working. We always, just like our feedback, we always get a lot of feedback from you all about what things may or may not work and what problems they may cause, and it's usually helpful for the entire audience to know what those things are. So if you have something like that, please share it with us. And we will be sure to communicate it and bring it up with the team if we see, you know, the differences. But I think the big change for system preferences that I'm going to talk about here is that we used to be able to manage system preferences with a payload, an MDM profile, sorry. And that MDM profile would allow us to control, you know, what they can do in system preferences versus what they can't do, what we can hide versus what we can disable. And that no longer works for the most part with the new system settings. They migrated to a new payload. It doesn't have all the same feature-rich functionality that the existing one does. I think the virtual environments, I already see someone mention that. At least with these changes, you know, it's a lot harder, especially on silicone devices. It's impossible right now to emulate like ADE enrollment, manipulate serials. Maybe not impossible, but it just doesn't exist yet. So that's a big change, and obviously the system updates that we're talking about now. Let's see what else, some other information here. It looks like Sentinel-1 needs to be on the latest version if it won't work. I think that's probably true for a lot of antivirus solutions. So you definitely want to make sure those are updated. Can Addigy install macOS updates unattended in a preset schedule? Yes, and we'll talk about that as this show goes on. Some some of the comments is that we're checking with our AV solutions, Bitdefender and Sentinel-1. Looks like we already got an answer about Sentinel-1 needs to be on the latest one. Some VPN apps need to be updated. I think that's probably the biggest concern, is like getting those apps updated before you upgrade.
And then printer drivers. Actually, I've seen that come up more and more often recently. Actually, it looks like there's several vendors that are still trying to work on Ventura to get those running too. Yep.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of interesting ones here. Rights to full disk or recording and system preferences not working for installation. So I'm not sure about that one, but that would be an interesting one. I know at the release of macOS 13.0, there was a problem with antivirus, anti-malware solutions as well, where the PPPC permission for that got wiped or got ignored. So, you know, we'll talk about 13.0 specifically, the one that caused that later down in the road here, in case that ends up being the available update. All right, we'll keep looking at these as they come in. So if you still see them, let us know. If you still have them, send them in. We'll circle back to them, but we're gonna move on here. Upgrades versus updates. What's the difference? So historically, we've had two separate mechanisms that are kind of decoupled. Software updates, which is what most of us go through on a regular basis, which is, you know, 12.6.1 is the version I'm running, and 12.6.2 comes out, and I want to do a system update to 12.6.2. Versus a full OS upgrade is I'm going from Monterey to Ventura. And by and large, they were decoupled through different things, different internal mechanics, like the software update daemon, the software update process has a couple brain services and a few other services that run while it's doing system updates. And then usually we would do the OS upgrades to the traditional macOS installer.app. And that's how we did those install macOS in our public catalog. And that's how our blocker actually works, by blocking this app and looking for this app. And now going forward, these are actually combined. So Apple's eliminating this .app. It's not eliminated entirely, but they're rolling the full OS upgrade mechanism into system updates. And that's a very tricky thing to do. And we're going to see why here as kind of this process unfolded. All right, so macOS V-day, or Ventura Day as we're referring to it, January 22nd. This is 5 days away. We really wanted to do this webinar sooner, but you know, with the holidays and everything, you know, this was as close as we could to do it before the actual V-day. So what's happening? IT admins will no longer be able to block or defer Ventura. The existing deferral system allows for 90 days, and you need to block or stop system updates entirely. And what this means is the MDM profile that we have to defer system updates only allows us to do it for a max of 90 days. That 90-day window ends on January 22nd. So the deferral can still be on the device, it can be removed, but at the end of the day, the user will see Ventura in their system preferences window. So any user who has automatic updates enabled, an MDM update mechanism, or a user in client to upgrade will be able to do so really without a mechanism to stop it. And the only way to stop it is to turn off system updates. So we'll talk more about how to stop it and work through it after. But that's kind of where we are. All right. So here's a diagram we built, I want to say in October, when Ventura was being released, and we understood that this could come as a minor update. So, you know, at this point, I just want to show the grand scheme of things of kind of how complicated this was before the 90-day window. And going forward, you know, all of this, we can just safely cross this out. And I'm gonna try and draw here and see if it gets me in trouble. So all of this is going to be out the window, because really it's going to be 90 days since macOS Ventura released. And if you're trying to stop those devices from getting to macOS Ventura, this might be a challenge. We're going to talk about some of the things you can and can't do, some of the things that will happen if you leave the deferral payload later on in the webinar, but we just wanted to kind of show like what the previous workflow was. Why was this workflow important? Well, because there was a bug in 12.3 and higher that, essentially, required you to upgrade to 12.6.1 so that this wouldn't happen, like they wouldn't see Ventura. So here we are, 90 days later. And I'm still drawing, 1 second. And here we are. So what's the worst that can happen, right? The new feature will allow Apple to, push a major OS upgrade through system updates. And you can inadvertently push a major OS upgrade. For example, as an IT admin, I may want to deploy 12.6.2, which is the current latest version of Monterey. But what might end up happening is the device actually goes to macOS 13.1 instead. And we actually found this out the hard way and posted to our status page because the week of December 19th, when this deferral window started kind of not mattering anymore, the minor updates became available as system updates. And coincidentally, if you use the MDM would try, any MDM vendor, this doesn't matter what vendor you were using, it would try and push a 12.6.2 update as an example, and it would inadvertently upgrade the device to macOS Ventura. Now, that might not be a big deal for everybody, but usually most end users do not want to be upgraded to a full OS, version without knowing or without them intentionally doing it or without expectation, right? Usually we just apply those system updates to apply the latest security patch or whatever it is, not necessarily we want to change the whole end user experience on them. Regardless if the software works or not, regardless if our VPNs and security solutions are working, it's just like that's a kind of disruptful in the middle of the day or at the start or end of your day. So where are we now with this issue? We actually updated the status page and Apple confirmed that this is a bug that is going to be fixed in 12.6.3. So you can see it here, resolves an issue where using MDM to install macOS 12 update may install macOS 13. So it is going to be fixed in 12.6.3, thankfully. But if you have MDM updates right now, 12.6.3 isn't released, and you're using MDM updates, there is a chance that this could happen to your fleet. So was part of our status page notification. If you want to read more on it, check out status.addigy.com. It's there at the bottom. And essentially, like we pretty much said, just disable MDM updates for the time being until this bug is fixed. If you cannot have any devices upgrade to Ventura, because there's not much we can control. We are not telling the device to upgrade to Ventura. All right, so if you're just curious on these things and want to know more about like how to even know if MDM is kicking off an update, or you may run into this situation, we thought it might be helpful to kind of show you how we debug this stuff so that maybe you can do it on your own if you're interested. This is from the var log install.log. This log rolls over. There's usually, if the device has a lot of activity in the installation process or a lot of installers run, there might be rolled over logs like install.log.0, install.log.1, 2, 3, etc. In these logs, you can see the process of these system updates. And in the process, you will see if MDM initiated the update with MDM initiated equal 1. I wish this logged this in this manner everywhere. MDM initiated updates log to this extent with this verbosity, but if they're initiated in other ways, it may not log it with this extent for verbosity, if that makes sense, meaning if the user manually did it or someone ran a script, etc. Now, finding these in the logs are a little bit tricky, but usually the key identifier you should do is check out the system information SPX file under installations, and it'll tell you exactly when that upgrade, in this case, installed. So you can actually go here, say, hey, look, I saw it installed on December 16th at 2:27 p.m. Now you can go back to this log at that same timestamp, and you should be able to see if who initiated that upgrade or what initiated that upgrade in that process, should you ever need to. Now, gathering these logs is relatively straightforward. We actually have a script for you if you want to see it, and I'm gonna send that in the chat here. This will actually upload that stuff to Slack, but you can upload it to whatever file storage system is of your preference, and it just really helps to kind of debug these things. And we'll probably ask for the same thing if you need help from us, but we will help collect that as well. So if anybody's interested in debugging these updates or figuring out what's happening under the hood, those logs really, really help and kind of tell us what's going on, because at the end of the day, Addigy as the MDMs or any MDM vendor sends the update process to the MDM servers, the Apple push notification servers, and they send the command, and then the device handles most of the work there.
Yeah, and then for just to kind of reiterate, for anybody who's new and just kind of coming into Apple management, or maybe this is your first foray into real heavy MDM management, that's for one, that's the way that most all MDM communications functions, is it gets sent from your MDM platform, your MDM vendor, kind of to the middleman, which is Apple's MDM server, and then that facilitates the communication to the device, and then the device sends a response back that said, yes, I did this job, no, I didn't, here's an error, stuff like that. And then also to clarify with in terms of also why this is such a big deal for us and why we're continuing to harp on this, is the update controls of the past, where we used to be able to call a lot of these processes from the command line. They don't exist for us in the new operating systems. We can't interface with this in the same way. So really, when it comes to Apple management, MDM updates is the way, the truth, and the light going forward, right? That is something to get used to. And it's also, why we've built out our new system updates via MDM beta, and why whenever stuff like this comes up, it's so important for us to talk about it, because it's the only method we have. So again, if you're new to Apple and MDM management, first off, obviously welcome aboard the ship. But always don't ever hesitate to reach out just with questions, even if it's more just on like how Apple stuff works. If all you can remember is support@addigy.com, you can submit a ticket there, and then they'll get you in touch with whoever we need to make sure we can get your questions answered and make sure you're managing your devices the right way. So as much as this is, we're going to kind of get in the weeds with we're talking about checking log files and things if you're not used to it. If nothing else, always remember, please come talk to us. We start getting nervous when you stop talking to us. So don't ever hesitate to reach out, and we'll get you in touch with whoever we need to.
Right on that. And just as I was taking a look at a few questions here, this is being recorded for anybody that just joined. No worries. Addigy.com/events. It will be available there after. Just to answer a few questions I can while we're at this break here before we do talk about path going forward. Why Slack? It doesn't keep messages longer than 90 days. That must be like a free Slack plan. You can send them wherever you want. That script just does it with, that KB does it with Slack, but you could do it to Google Chat, I guess, if you want, or Dropbox or S3 or whatever you can publicly upload stuff to within reason, or whatever your preference is. How is declarative fitting into us? Declarative device management, I assume, is the question. DDM, I believe, is still iOS only. So by and large, a lot of these problems that we're talking about today don't really affect iOS at all. And I think most of us really don't have a problem with upgrading to iOS unless there's like some app that isn't supported for some reason. And we will try and answer as much questions as we can. I see a Cyber Essentials Plus certification that we insist on updating within 14 days. We'll talk about that, like kind of like what to do next. So stay tuned there. All right, so I see one more question about what Travis mentioned about running commands running commands terminal on macOS Ventura using Addigy. You should be able to run commands. I think maybe what Travis was talking about was like you can't do system updates through the command line CLI utility, the command line interface utility called software update binary. That's traditionally how everybody did software updates, and Apple has been moving towards MDM updates. And if you do use the software update binary actually prompts the user in most cases to authenticate the update. Even if they're not an admin, they need a secure token. That in result, you know, may cause, you know, some other issues like verifying if the user has a secure token or not, and then we're into a whole nother conversation. So, yeah, the MDM update mechanism is the mechanism dictated by Apple that allows to do unattended scheduled updates in that manner. Now, going forward, that is the only mechanism that we are aware of without any user interaction. All right, let's keep moving here. So updates going forward. So this kind of leaves us in a pickle, and you know, I know a few of our customers, partners have written some great blog posts about this, because it does leave us kind of like in a catch-22 situation here. We want to install updates, right? Like we need to install updates for security reasons, but leaving updates enabled could potentially lead us to upgrading to a full OS that we may have problems supporting. So what we want to confirm here is the blocker will not block the system update process, right? So if Ventura is available as a system update, the blocker will not block it, because the blocker will only block the .app, right? It only blocks the .app process. It does not block the system update processes that we were mentioned earlier, because then that will break the device from updating. System updates, again, can now do the full OS upgrade, so the full OS upgrade to Ventura. System updates over 90 days will not be deferred. So Ventura is going to hit 90-day mark on January 22nd. So what does this mean? It really means that it will not be hidden from the user. That's really all the deferrals do. So the MDM profile to set up a deferral window that we always talk about and reference, all it does is hide it from the user, meaning they go into system preferences, they will not see it. That's usually how they get to it in the first place, right? All right. System upgrades can still use the full OS installer, meaning the old .app mechanism is still available, and the blocker will still block it. I see someone made a comment that like if they change the name of the full OS installer and kind of do some tricky stuff to it, it will get past the blocker. That is correct. So the blocker does have some things that like it can't work around. Now, usually they click the full OS installer today when the end user clicks that big box in system preferences. So this will still work prior to Ventura. So in the grand scheme of things, what we're going to recommend is not to remove the blocker. If you want to block Ventura, do not remove the blocker. While it doesn't block every scenario, it's good to still have it in place to kind of deter that user from doing it. And there may be some other alternatives you can do to prevent the user from seeing the system updates in this manner, and you can use MDM updates to manage them. And there's some great questions here. We'll be getting them into just a second. All right. Okay, next steps. So deferrals don't work anymore. What do we do now? You may want to actually remove the deferral payload. Sounds crazy, right? I think there's quite a bit of controversy around that now, and what to see and what you will see. And this is the reason why we're going to say you may want to remove the deferral payload. So I think Mauro, actually, I'm going to call out Mauro. Was it Mauro? Let me double check. Who said like, you know, we have 14 days to apply the updates because of, you know, security reasons. Now, if you have the 90-day deferral payload deployed, what's going to happen on January 22nd? Well, let's just show you here. The deferral payload is expected to show the oldest build of Ventura to these users after 90 days, because that's when Ventura released. And at that point, it was 13.0. It was not 13.1. So what does that mean? What that means is they're going to get the very, very first build of Ventura, the one with all the bugs, the one with all the security problems. And I think that one even broke the antiviruses if they weren't managed by MDM. So definitely something to keep in mind. And we actually tested this, and I'm going to pull it on screen here. So pardon me while I show this. So you can see here, this machine I actually changed the deferral window to like, I don't know, 7 days ago, which was like 83 days or something. I was showing system preferences here. And what they see is 13.0. They do not see the latest macOS Ventura 13.1 or 13.2 comes out by then, which is rumor is Monday. They won't see 13.2 either. So from a security perspective, you don't most likely want them upgrading to 13.0 because then they're going to have to update immediately thereafter. And that's not the best user experience either. Also, it could cause a whole bunch of other problems. So we're going to jump back into that in just a second here. But what you could do is disable system updates, not the best experience, right? You still want users to update. You still want to manage their updates, especially with MDM updates. What you could do is just disable the software update pane in system preferences. It hasn't changed until Ventura, so those profiles will still work for now. And at least it gives you the ability to kind of hide those updates and you can manage them from MDM perspective for the user. So the question then is, should we upgrade to Ventura? Should you encourage your users to upgrade to Ventura? And the stance that Apple has, for better or for worse, is that you should upgrade to Ventura, your entire fleet. And the reason why is because they're more and more not backporting security fixes to older operating systems. So that means known security problems they are not fixing on other operating systems nearly as aggressively as they are on Ventura. So that goes back to the problem of, do you want them to deploy to 13.0? And if we take a look here at these links, 13.1 had, what was publicly posted here isn't that much, but if you actually look at the security contents of 13.1, there's, I think, over 30 fixes that we looked at, Travis and I, before this webinar, that were applied in 13.1 that will not be on that device when it updates to 13.0. So that's why usually at this point, we're going to start recommending remove the deferral window if you're comfortable with your users upgrading to Ventura. Obviously, that's easier said than done, right? We all have our own requirements. We were talking about all these different tools, to do the update process or to, Ignite and Sentinel-1 and all these different antivirus tools. So it may make sense for you as your organization is ready to go to Ventura, just remove the deferral, let the users go if they need to, or hide that stuff from them the best you can and manage the updates through MDM. Those are the two scenarios essentially that we're looking at from a management perspective. Now, what you can do, let's say you wanted to disable some of these updates, if you will. I'm going to pull up on screen in just a second. So you can come in here and create a software update profile. And you can say, you can disable all the updates you want, right? You can leave some enabled, like the security updates, but you can uncheck some of these updates and enforce it so that they can't turn on these automatic updates. You're not enabling the updates. You can deploy this profile, updates will be disabled. But then it goes back to the question of, should I be disabling updates or should I be applying the latest updates for security reasons? And it's like, a cost benefit analysis. I know we all measure it differently. Some teams you may want to, some you may not. I see a lot of questions about system preferences. We also have a system preference payload here, as you can see. So you can disable, enable, or hide the functionality. So that is the other option that we were talking about.
Yeah, and then to just as an addendum, it says deprecated, and that's because it's not supported in Ventura. The last supported OS for this is macOS 12, which is Monterey. Right, so it will you will still be able to hide it, but if you try to apply this to Ventura, well, one, there's no system preferences anymore. It's all system settings, so this whole payload isn't valid on 13 and up.
Exactly. So, you can see here I'm on Ventura. It's called system settings now. Previously system preferences. These won't have as much effect at all on Ventura, but they will still, do their job in the previous OSs, and that might be what you need. So I think that addresses some of the questions. There's another question here. Will they still need admin to install the OS update? That depends if we're talking OS update or OS upgrade, how that update's being performed. As an example, if you use our MDM functionality, I'm gonna show it off really quickly here. If you use this, if you use this MDM functionality, this and the device has MDM, obviously, right? It needs MDM to do this. It will not require any credentials per se. Now, if you initiate an update to the command line utility, it will prompt a user for their password. It doesn't need to be an admin user. It needs to be a user that has volume ownership, aka a secure token. Now, if you use our full OS upgrade, it will also prompt the user, I'm pretty sure, on Silicon and Silicon Big Sur and higher. So if you're upgrading Silicon Big Sur to Monterey, it would prompt the user through those OS upgrades using the app that we talked about at the beginning. So let me take a look at. Does MDM updates require M1 and Monterey or just Monterey? MDM updates works best on Monterey and higher, regardless of the chip type, because Apple has been deprecating this functionality from the binary that we used to use, that macOS updates uses. As you can see here in Big Sur and higher, it started getting, kind of limited as to what it could do, and they started moving everything over here. Still a work in progress on the framework itself about having feature parity, but one day Apple will add it.
And on top of that, the other kind of big caveat that you'll run into more on the iOS side is with the supervised state, right? The MDM update commands are only available to supervised devices. Good news on your Macs, which is again kind of the main focus of today. If you are running macOS 11 and you enroll into an MDM, even without automated device enrollment, so long as that profile is installed and approved by an admin, congrats, your Mac is supervised. So it's already in supervised mode. For iOS, it takes a little bit more to get that done. Really, your best bet is automated device enrollment or manually supervising. But for your Macs, Apple did us a real big solid back in macOS 11. So long as you get that profile approved by an admin on the device, you're good, you're supervised. And then if you get to macOS Monterey, you've got system updates via MDM commands that you can use.
Yeah, let me add more visual clues here for the audience. So what Travis is explicitly saying, if your device is running Silicon or an M1, M2 chip, and you manually install the MDM profile, you're going to see this warning on those devices. This warning is specific to kernel extensions, which in the grand scheme of things shouldn't even matter anymore. If there's a vendor out there using kernel extensions, I think that software probably doesn't even work anyways. But specifically software updates. So because the device was enrolled manually, what you're going to have to do to manage software updates through MDM, just in general, is go into the recovery OS and enable reduce security mode. So I'm going to show that here. I'm going to just boot into recovery mode on this VM so everybody can see. There's actually a walkthrough in this KB article. I'll send it here if anybody's interested. But essentially, you need to allow remote management extensions and software updates. And that's what's going to happen here. And this is going into the chat now. Just give it a second. All right, while that loads, we will go back to some questions and answers here.
Yeah, one of them, just for people looking for like system updates beta, what Ponce was showing off there. It is in public beta for us. So if you can't see it right now, it probably means that it's not turned on for your environment. It's in the account and then settings, and where you configure like your billing email and all of that good stuff. Down at the bottom of this page is where we put all of our beta features, so you can turn these on. You might see a couple here, sneak peeks of things Ponce has got that you might not find on your own. But the one that you want, it'll be system updates via MDM, is I believe what it's called in the UI there.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in a test environment. Okay, so going back to more questions here. Let me restart this thing. Since you use Parallels, do you know if Parallels 18 works on Ventura? It does, yes. If you're using Parallels on M1 chips, it's not as fun. We've actually been playing with a tool called Virtual Buddy that you see me kind of using on this webinar here. I think the new virtualization framework just makes it challenging for everybody involved. Not just it's not a Parallels issue per se. It's that Apple changed what they deprecated kernel extensions, which allowed them to virtualize unique things in the operating system, which they can no longer do now. So it is a little bit more challenging. Here is the recovery OS that you would see and make these changes that Travis is talking about here. So you just go to startup security utility, and this user that needs to do this also needs to have volume ownership, aka secure token. So I already had the software updates. You don't necessarily need this one. In fact, I wouldn't even say any software should really be using kernel extensions at this point. And then you'll be prompted for an admin's name and password that has secure token to make these changes.
And then again, the reasoning why this has to be done, and keep in mind, this is on Macs. They're running Big Sur or newer, right? So macOS 11 and up, and that are on the new silicon hardware, right? And the reason for this is because they don't get by default what Apple calls like the MDM bootstrap token, which is its own kind of special auth token that provides MDM the permission, right? In much the same way PPPC and system extension provides access for MDM to manage those things. Bootstrap token applies MDM the ability to manage and enforce these system updates. So if you come through automated device enrollment, the device receives that automatically because it's part of that trusted enrollment process. Without that, if you do a manual enrollment, that's why we have to do this reduced security recovery mode, all of these actions.
Exactly. And we got a question on like, why do you have to do this? So like, I'm going to put this device in a factory default state, right? So I'm going to say nothing is enabled. And what's going to happen now is if I reboot this device, go back to the native operating system, and then go back into Addigy and try and like go to the device itself, the Caterpillar here, and go to updates, it's not going to be able to find these updates anymore. Why? Because we can't manage them. So we can't even see this stuff here anymore. If that is not checked. So if you ever see that, like, hey, you know, I can't manage this, or the updates aren't showing, it could be that. I hope that answered the question. All right, we're getting a bunch of questions here. Can we join Andrea's beta test? I don't think you want to join that beta test, to be frank. What's the best way to get devices to 13.1? So if you just want to, you say, I don't care about any of this stuff. I just want my devices on the latest and greatest, which is, sometimes, dangerous, if you will, but, you can do this. So let's say, you just say keep devices at the latest OS. You can do that. And then like, if you wanted to, you could just press start system updates here, and that's going to push it to all of these devices in this policy, 65 devices immediately right now. It's going to try and maintain the maximum version allowed, which will be 12.6.2. If I put the latest OS, it'll say 13.1 because that is the latest OS. So it would try and, upgrade those devices up to 13.1, and it would do it on your schedule without user interaction, or you could force it all at once. Here's a great question. Thank you for asking this question. What about reverting back if new OS release is not corresponding to expectations? That in itself is a challenge that, in itself will cause problems if you don't erase and reinstall, unfortunately. And that's not easy to say to an end user sometimes. And I almost tear up saying that myself. So what I mean by that is when you do these OS upgrades, they usually make firmware level changes that modify the underlying OS, and those cannot be reverted back. Like I know some of us have played with, TMUtil snapshot, where you can take a snapshot of your machine, just know that this snapshot doesn't take a snapshot of the recovery OS and the underlying firmware that it lies on. So even if you revert back to a snapshot, you may have bigger problems now because you're running a different OS than your firmware, and the computer might have a heart attack, if you will. So usually the cleanest way to revert back is erase the device, find the OS you want to install on that device, and hopefully, if it's silicone, it's Big Sur and higher anyways, but if it's Intel, you got a few options. Do I prefer VirtualBuddy over UTM? UTM is also a great tool. I just have been playing extensively with VirtualBuddy, trying to manipulate the hardware level settings in some form, and I haven't made much progress in UTM. All right. Okay, so it looks like there was a clarification to an earlier statement. If all my devices are on 12.6.1 and I want to move them to 13.1 without stopping at 13.0, I would remove the deferral. I would keep the latest OS here, and then I would start pushing out the upgrades on an aggressive schedule if that's what you want. Obviously, give your end user a heads up so they know what to expect. Will the update give you a prompt to restart your PC, or does it just auto shut you down to update? That's a great question. There's a few options here. Default, install later, force restart. Obviously, force restart is pretty self-explanatory. You push it, it's gonna. I don't think it notifies the user whatsoever. Default will give I believe it's 120-second countdown, 2 minutes. I might be 60 seconds for the user to defer or not defer. If the user doesn't respond, it'll update. Install later allows the user to defer X a number of times. I have to confirm the number of times they are allowed to defer on install later, but there is a preset limit set by the MDM protocol. And going back to that question, do you have to do that recovery OS setting to manage MDM updates, or for the MDM to manage updates? Yes, unfortunately, that is the way.
Yeah. For all of your, again, the caveat there is you're manually enrolled. So using that device enrollment link, downloading the profile, shooting the, use the QR code, whatever. Unless you go through automated device enrollment, you're going to have to go through that workflow, because that's the only time the device gets that special auth token that it needs.
Yeah, and then there's another question here. This is actually, I don't know if we can do it, but it's a great feature request in my opinion, to set the minimum supported OS. We allow the maximum version here, but I could see why a minimum version would be nice. I can take back that to the team and say this was a great feature request by this individual. If we have to erase install, this is a great question. I have to use EACS erase install. Is there a tool to install a specific version? I think erase install just goes to the latest version of that operating system, is my first thought. I haven't spent too much time thinking about it, and yeah, that's a great question. I'll have to confirm that one for you. Yeah, some feedback about like having end users go into recovery and enable reduced security. Like, what does supervised get us exactly on a Mac and MDM? That's a great question, right? Supervision
There's a lot to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Supervision has gone through a couple different states. Apple's changed it quite a few times now at this point. But by and large, if you enroll a device in MDM, whether manually or automated, that gives you supervision. And you'll see, like, I'm gonna pull it up here. No matter if it's manual or not, it'll show in system preferences under profiles, this device is supervised and managed by. So you see supervised and managed by Addigy MDM. So in terms of supervision, it allows us to do a number of different things, and I'll pull up what that is, like whether it's a command, like activation lock, or file vault key. You know, you can search here what requires supervision, what doesn't. Looks like delete user, list user, change wallpaper, enable remote desktop, disable remote desktop, enable lost mode location, play lost mode sound. These are iOS specific. So shut down device. So supervision gives us that control, but what we're specifically doing for software updates isn't a supervision dependency. It's more like Apple changed how software updates work. And I remember them talking about kind of how the new software updates mechanism needed to be more secure. And this was their solution to making it more secure. I wish there was a better answer. How do we get sudo talk shirts? You missed it, but we will go through it at the end here with the last couple minutes if we have time. What is the download timeout and download installing 13.1? I have many users who are remote in rural areas with low bandwidth. I think the good thing about, I want to say, those update processes is if it comes in as a software update, it's going to be a smaller OS installer, I want to say, but I'm not sure if it's going to work any faster or slower than the actual bandwidth of the device. And all of this is working through the native system update processes. If you're using our full OS installer now, then it takes about it takes however long it takes to download, but then to prompt and install probably take 15-20 minutes. Defaults install you have this set you can change. What you're trying to install overnight. Okay. Thank you for sharing kind of what you're testing. That looks like a good plan. And here's all right, and no worries. You don't have to apologize. I don't think I said it 10 times, but honestly, when Travis and when we're going through this and I had to explain it to Travis, I think I said it around 10 times as well. So to reiterate, if you have macOS updates enabled through system updates via MDM, will the device go to Ventura through this process? Until 12.6.3 is released, there is a possibility that the device could go to Ventura. Yes, there's a bug that Apple is going to fix in 12.6.3 where they inadvertently upgrade the devices to Ventura when we send a key to explicitly update to 12.6.2 or 12.6.1 or whatever the case might be. So if you have this enabled, you may want to just kind of uncheck it for now if you're worried about that until 12.6.3 is released, hopefully next week.
Yeah, and that's the other part of why this has been so frustrating is it's not even a definite way to kick this off. Like if you have system updates via MDM enabled, it's going to pass this. It's kind of hit or miss. Some devices see it, others don't. And it's it's been it's a big reason of what prompted us doing this webinar is that it wasn't a consistent, easily identifiable, this device will see it, this device will not. So
Exactly. We were just as shocked as everybody else when we were getting messages of like, hey, my machine upgraded to Ventura, and we're like, wow.
right.
So we spent a good week looking into it. So I see a great question. So if we have our upper limit set to max version just like this, 12.9.99, does this mean Addigy will not update past 12.x, but the user will be prompted to update to 13? Prompted is a nice word. It might just do it because it's expecting to install 12.6.2. At least right now, with until 12.6.3 is released. So I hope that answers the question. Like if you have this, there is a possibility it could still go to Ventura. They may not know it's going to Ventura. It might do it anyways, or it might install 12.6.2 and then immediately when it reboots, install Ventura. Is some of the behavior we've seen. What are the security implications of making that change in recovery? I know it's on a per team basis, but is the cost benefit being able to manage software updates versus downgrading security and recovery? Honestly, kernel extensions really shouldn't be a thing anymore. I really don't like that those settings are coupled together because it's kind of like implying like I want to use both when really most of us just want to do system updates. Like let us just do system updates, right? But I think really the only security concern my my thought process is the kernel extensions, because the kernel extensions essentially have access to the kernel when they shouldn't at this point. But if you don't check the first security setting that we show here, I don't think it will be a problem.
And again, it does, to come back in case, again, if anybody's sort of new, like kernel extensions really were when software needed access to the deeper lying pieces of the OS, they had to have kernel extension whitelisting. Apple in 10.15, I believe, released system extensions that kind of re-architected how software approaches that. So now really basically everything should be using system extensions as opposed to kernel extensions, because it gives that software much less power over the device as a whole. So essentially, system updates is the future. Apple's kind of, allowing that you may have some legacy systems that are kind of monolithic and harder to update that may not be fully ready for kernel extensions. So this option does still exist, although really truthfully, most software that you go to install is going to request system extension access if you're not passing that through an MDM profile already.
Yeah. A couple more questions here. If like these settings aren't enabled, can the user still update? Yes, the user can still update themselves 100%. If MDM updates aren't turned on, is it still up to the user to decide when to update? Yes, because if we're not pushing the updates, it's really up to them to do the updates, unless you could use Addigy to nag them. And that's what we would do if you use the older update mechanism, just prompt them over and over to do it. Yeah, I see a comment about you lose activation lock if you reduce security. That's weird because like usually activation lock requires ADE enrollment. So I don't know how they would both work at the same time unless it's like iCloud activation lock, but I'll chat more with you on that one because that's an interesting one. All right. What happens if my machine's on Big Sur and I have these MDM updates? So I'll just be frank, Big Sur MDM updates really didn't work until 12.5. From 12.0 to 12.4, they were just broken. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. So I don't know how much help that is, but if you're on like Big Sur 11.6.4, I think that's when they started working much more reliably. And they put that in their release notes too. So I can pull that up here in just a second. How soon will the recording be available after this webinar? Great question. It does take some time for the zeros and ones to convert the recording and upload to, wherever it's uploading and get posted from the marketing team. So I would love to say immediately after, but it does take them to some time. So I'll say by the end of the day, but technically it's the end of the day here in the East Coast almost. So there's that. But latest tomorrow, so no worries. Oh, when will we see the MDM profile for settings? I think they started adding some of them recently. I'll have to double check on that one, but you should start seeing them soon, is my expectation. Some of it obviously requires Apple's things to get done. So where was I going?
And then another thing, just to kind of like reiterate, because I've seen like one or two questions on it going through. But especially also if you turned up a little late, Apple did announce that in 12.6.3, this bug where Ventura, specifically 13.0, is being passed as part of like the updates and all of this, should be fixed. So if your devices get to 12.6.3, you shouldn't have to worry about this. This is what Apple has put in their release notes for that. 12.6.3 isn't out yet, as far as I know. I think Ponce said probably Monday, I think, is the scuttlebutt on it right now when we might expect a release. But if you can get your devices between, if you can hang on till from now to then and get them to 12.6.3, you shouldn't have to worry about seeing this behavior where it gets passed and automatically upgraded to macOS 13.
All right, we're at 5 minutes over. I'm just gonna reiterate kind of how to get the sudo talk shirts because I saw a couple questions on that, and then we'll answer more questions. But if people want to break, they can, just for the sake of the shirt. Here is the link to the Reddit post. If you leave a feedback on how this webinar went today, good, bad, happy, or sad, we take no offense to it. We will. You can then fill out this Google form here and post your comment and send us your email and any other feedback you have on the webinar series. I'm going to send just a second here, and we will send you over a shirt. So again, the steps are: leave a comment, feedback on how we did today, and then fill out the sudo talks survey. You should look like this. And let us know how sudo talks are going. If you did post on the Reddit, post your answer and your email so we can, and your size obviously, so we can send that out. We'll probably email you with, asking for the information where to send it and whatnot. But that's essentially how we're giving out the shirt today. But there might be something new next time. There was, I think, a couple. I know we tried to get to almost all the questions. I guess there is one more question that I saw a couple times. But if you want to set up macOS updates to do unattended schedule updates, this is the mechanism. So you just want to set what version, or if you just say keep at the latest version, whatever the case might be, and then this is the time frame in which they would deploy. The default schedule is on nightly at 2 a.m. UTC, but if you change the schedule, I'm pretty sure it runs on device time. So meaning you enable the schedule. If not, it just runs nightly at 2 a.m. If you put a schedule or run at that time for those devices in their time zone. We are not doing cybersecurity training today. That was actually a comment about the cybersecurity essentials training said that we should keep the devices 14-day update window, meaning after an update is released, it should be applied to the devices within 14 days. I think that's definitely a great goal. Sometimes it's a little bit unrealistic, especially for OS upgrades, because the vendors have sometimes a lot of things to change on their side. And while we can say, just choose a different vendor, that's easier said than done. I see a request here about a question. Let me see if I can find it. But we will continue asking questions here probably till like 4:15. But if anybody needs to drop off, feel free to. We're just here to kind of chat and talk about things at this point now through Q&A.
Yeah, I think Ponce, kind of what that question is asking is is this like a concern if I'm not even on Monterey? Like if I'm on Ventura, if I'm on the later builds of Ventura, 11.7, anything like that.
Big Sur,
can I? Yeah, sorry, on Big Sur. Yeah, can I still see this Ventura? Will users still see this Ventura prompt? Can system updates still pass like the Ventura upgrade? So I think that's what the question's asking there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like the deferral payload works on Big Sur, and it would essentially, once 90 days hit, they will be able to see it. Now, in terms of the system update on Big Sur, I'm not sure if that would be a thing. I know that this bug that we were talking about earlier is only on Monterey, from what I understand, but in terms of Big Sur and getting minor updates for Ventura, I'm not 100% sure if that's gonna happen, but we can follow up with you on that one. That should be really easy for us to test that one.
Yeah, actually, I think I have a VM laying around I could test on that with. So we'll give that a go, and we'll see if we can't get back to you and make sure I bookmark that one.
System preferences for updates I have hidden. It sounds like for system preferences under software update, you have that software update pane hidden. Will the notification pop up Those notifications tend to do pop up, yeah. I don't know all the circumstances on which they pop up, and I think if they did pop up, it could potentially take them to that hidden preference pane. Because while the preference pane is hidden, it's not inaccessible, and I've seen other ways to access those hidden preference panes.
That's
The only
correct.
other, yeah, the only other way to kind of stop that is to disable the pane entirely. And for those that aren't following, what we're talking about is disabling the system update preference pane here. Or hiding it. So like if we go back to the catalog here, we can take a look exactly at what that reference is. And let's see, software update. Because I know I can bypass these. If the user is smart enough, they can bypass the hidden stuff.
Yeah, and then with that payload, there's the three options. There's disable, hide, and I forget what the other ones, but it's just click disable if you want to just outright disable the pane as opposed to just hiding it.
All right. How do you disable rather than hide? That would just be going back to this, like, so we created this one as a hidden. You see there's three sections here, disabled, enabled, hidden. So that would just be going to disabled and then checking the box for that one and including that key. The example I just did was for hidden. I'm gonna circle back to the questions one more time, see if we got all of them. If we didn't, please ask us again. There's quite a bit of questions we're trying to sort through.
Yeah. Oh, so a good question actually on that, Ponce, related was if we disable that pane, does it not check for system updates or software updates? I believe it does still check, but the user just can't access the pane to take any action on that. So the system
Exactly.
still checks, but they won't see the big red one because that entire software update pane is just not accessible for them.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, we're gonna give it two more minutes here. So get your questions in as always you can, and we're gonna call it. Is there a way to force the system to not check for updates? There is. You can go back to the MDM profiles, create a new profile, go to software update, and say disable system updates. And you can choose which ones you want to leave enabled. I will definitely leave enabled, install critical updates and Xprotect MRT Gatekeeper. These are native security tools for macOS, but everything else you can say, I don't want to, I don't want, especially I don't want them on beta releases. And then you can create this profile and then deploy it to your policies, and it will essentially disable system updates locally on that device. You may still be able to push them through MDM as well, but essentially the end user wouldn't be able to change those, and they will be turned off. Here's a great question. Do I need to enable all these keys in the system preferences pane? So we actually, this is all based on the feedback I think most of you all provided here. I know definitely some of you, where we had the ability to build these MDM profiles in our GUI, and they're kind of coupled together. And now what we did was we made them a lot like Profile Creator, where you put an include key. This is how all the profiles work now. And you can decide what settings you want to manage. So like if you include this key, everything there is going to be, included in the MDM profile. So, you want to say, I want to disable these, the rest of them won't be disabled, right? But you don't have to enable these keys. So like it won't hide anything, it won't enable anything, it'll just do that specific one. And the same thing goes with all the other payloads like software updates. Like if you just check this key and turn off beta updates, that's all it's going to do. It won't apply any of these other things unless you click this checkbox to include them in the profile. If I just include the checkbox here with nothing, it's actually going to put an empty value there. So you may not want to just include everything. And usually what we say is, just include the individual slices that you need. Okay, here's another great question. Where are the deferral updates? So that is under the restrictions under software updates. And I'm going to show you mine that I built that we see on this device that is showing Ventura here. So I have delay user visibility of software updates. You need this key in place. And then delay user visibility of major macOS software updates. And you can control the major updates on the device or the minor updates on the device. Now, obviously, this gets a little bit trickier now because major updates sometimes can be in a minor OS category. But in the grand scheme of things, up until January 22nd, you may want to put the largest value for both. You may not. But definitely, like if you're blocking Ventura, you definitely want it there for the major updates because that's where a majority of the Ventura pushes come from. And the minor updates, is a fairly new thing. And this does delay. So like this is what we were talking about, where if you have this in place, you go to software updates, the device is going to see the oldest build of Ventura. So you may want to remove that deferral because they're going to see the oldest build of Ventura that doesn't have all the fixes. Exactly. Yeah, you already said it, and I'm late to the game here. Catching up with the chat. All right. Well, we hope you all had a great time this webinar, and it was a good one for the start 2023. Travis, I think it might be the best one this year so far. What do you think?
Hey, nobody's beat us yet, Ponce. So,
we don't have anything else. That looks like that's most of the questions. So with that said, everybody have a great day, week, beginning of the year, and don't forget to try and do that.
get your feedback in. Try and get a shirt.
And yeah, let's get those feedbacks in and get those shared. So everybody have a great week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.